I'm curious, how do you make sure that the experience of a half Latin, half Black kid from Brooklyn feels authentic? How do you approach that?
With great care. And the thing that we had to learn, the movie has 800 crew members. We had a lot of teammates and a lot of people who could speak to different facets of that experience. Like, there was a tightness about, like, an anxiety about, like, I don't want to oversteer or offend anybody with how we animate this kid and this family. We all felt a great responsibility, and it meant that we had to take risks and be confident in our collective to, like, avoid a mistake in the long run by making mistakes in the short.
Welcome to More Than a Movie, a podcast that gives you a behind-the-scenes look at your favorite movies. I'm your host, Alex Fumero. Last season, we did a deep dive on American Me. This season, I'll focus on a different movie each episode, feature interviews with the biggest actors, directors, writers, and producers behind them, and tap into the history of Latinos in film. When discussing the greatest movies of all time, it's rare that animated films are included in the conversation. But the process of putting together an Academy Award-worthy animated film is no less complex, no less devoid of the challenges of capturing the human experience than their live-action counterparts. Superhero movies, with few exceptions, are equally dismissed as works of cinematic art. And yet, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse defies underestimation by creating nuanced characters and subtle performances that somehow overshadow the groundbreaking special effects in the film. So I asked undercover Latino writer-director Phil Lord here to talk about the great power and great responsibility that came with making his Oscar-winning Spider-Man. So I am here with Phil Lord. Thank you for being here, Phil.
My pleasure.
Something a lot of people may not know about you is that you grew up in Miami, Florida.
Facts.
Your mother is Cuban. And I'm wondering, is that part of what drew you to this version of Spider-Man?
I think so. What it was more like the problem solving of it. Amy Pascal came to us and said, "Do you want to make an animated Spider-Man movie?" And we said, "No way." And we hung up. And when we were at lunch at like Chibo or something, and we ordered, and then I was like, "What if it's Miles?" We called her, and like Peter has to train him. That's pretty good.
Yep.
Called her back before the food arrived. I was like, "What if it's Miles Morales?" She's like, "I love it. I'll see you tomorrow."
Oh,
it was that fast.
Man, that went pretty easily.
It was super fast. Yeah. Cause it was the right idea at the right time. And Brian Bendis and Sara Pichelli created Miles in the comics that done such a nice job of like filling his life with just great characters and a really unique thing for a spider person, which he has an intact family.
Yeah.
So I wasn't necessarily coming at it with like a Latinidad agenda or even like, oh, cool, I can finally write about what it's like to grow up in a blended household, you know?
Yeah.
But I'd say that like it gave me the confidence to go like, oh, I have something personal to bring to the page on this, which, you know, that was like an interesting writing process. It was at a time when Chris and I were both trying to like separate the editing process from the writing process. So any notion that anybody had, like, let's just put it on the page as fast as possible. So a lot of things came out from my childhood and growing up, and the idea that like my father is American. Your Spanish is pretty good for an American. It's really bad for a Cuban. And so like that thing where like exactly. So that thing where like Miles speaks more Spanish than anyone on his, you know, in his building, but then when he goes to Spanish class, he's like behind. He's like interesting, or when he's with his family, things like that.
And that certain words come out, right? Like he says goodbye to his mom, to mommy in Spanish.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
that's
but
it.
Nothing else, you know, it's just little things that are heartfelt like that. Right.
And the way they all speak in two languages in the household and how that's like normal. And there's, I think, very little subtitles in the movie. I think there's some Mexican slang that is such a deep cut that I didn't understand it. I was like, what is this? I had to listen to it like 50 times. But yeah, for the most part, the idea of it not being otherized and it just being like part of the texture of life is like very much what it's like in South Florida, obviously.
Totally. So I wonder, if it wasn't sort of a conscious sort of lens you were looking through, what made you go from like The Call, where it's like absolutely not, like, fuck this, I'm not doing a fucking animated Spider-Man, to like ordering a Chibo and going, but Miles would be cool.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I don't know. I think at some point Amy had sent us a big basket of like every Spider-Man comic they had in the studio and just like dumped it on us. And it did go through the stuff. And I was like, he was the hottest selling comic. So we knew about him. I don't think I'd really read the books. So I just was really struck by I loved his family. It's the thing that's indestructible about his book and the movies, that like that family is so watchable. They have lots of conflict, but their love for each other is never in doubt. The marriage is never in doubt. They're there for that kid. And we like to start every movie with a question. And the question quickly arose, which is, what is the difference between a kid who thrives and a kid who doesn't? And so, and the answer, more or less, no matter the more people we talk to, the more experts we talk to, it was like attention.
Yeah.
Love. Like knowing someone's there. It could be even negative attention, just knowing that like you're accountable and that they're paying attention to you.
Well, there's tons of heartfelt moments in this movie, which I love. But one of them, which is a funny moment, also reminded me a little bit of my childhood, minus the cop part. But like when he gets dropped off at school and the dad is like, you didn't say I love you. Like if I left the house without kissing my dad on the cheek, like goodbye, he would not let it go. He's so persistent. He's like, I don't care if your friends are here. You're going to give me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. And it really comes through that he's like a very loved kid from the beginning. I just thought that was like a wonderful moment.
Yeah. I mean, that is what it's like growing up in a Latin household. And I think a lot of immigrant households where you're just like, this family is so important. Yeah. Maybe it was important in Havana, but now it's like the only thing we have.
Well, that brings up another kind of question I had around Miles's growing up and identity, which is like, part of it you definitely relate to. Obviously, part of it is not your lived experience. I'm curious, how do you make sure that the experience of a half Latin, half Black kid from Brooklyn feels authentic? How do you approach that?
With great care. And the thing that we had to learn, the movie has 800 crew members. We had a lot of teammates and a lot of people who could speak to different facets of that experience, like what it's like to grow up African American. We tried to bring a lot of New Yorkers onto the crew because we wanted to feel like New York, And Bob Persichetti, who's Italian American, like he had spent a lot of time in New York. He had also been like a graffiti writer. So many people had brought facets of themselves to this movie. We had a very diverse crew. We had a quite diverse story crew. And we did even better the next time on the second film. So, I mean, the real answer is like with great care.
Yeah.
And part of that care means the first year or so, a lot of these movies are animated mostly in Vancouver with the Canadians. And there was a tightness. Canada is a very diverse place, full of immigrants from all over the world. There was a tightness about like an anxiety about like, I don't want to oversteer or offend anybody with how we animate this kid and this family. And Bob went up there to say, guys, freedom to fail. You have to take swings. You have to like look at videos, because if this kid is stiff and doesn't have like any vibe, we're dead.
Yeah.
And we will have failed this. We all felt a great responsibility, and it meant that we had to take risks and be confident in our collective ability to like avoid a mistake in the long run by making mistakes in the short run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the performances are nuanced, which is what's so wonderful about it. He does have enough street swag, right? But he's also kind of like goofy, you know? He's a young teenager who like doesn't fully understand his body, you know? But aside from like that kind of personality that shines through, they're also very real. They didn't even feel animated. Like at a certain point, I forgot I was watching an animated movie, you know, especially like moments like when he's all tied up in the web and his dad comes to the door and their heads are sort of next to the door. And it's like a very quiet and short moment, but you're just kind of lost in their facial expression and eyes.
Miles, Miles is your dad. Please open the door. I get it, he is still ignoring me. Look, can we talk for a minute? Look, sometimes people drift apart, Miles. And I don't want that to happen to us, okay? Look, I know I don't always do what you need me to do or say what you need me to say, but I see this spark in you. It's amazing. It's why I push you, but it's yours. Whatever you choose to do with it, you'll be great. Look, call me when you can, okay? I love you. You don't have to say it back, though.
How does a team capture that subtlety and humanity in animated characters? What's that process like?
It takes forever.
Yeah.
And like that sequence, I think the first crack at it was Aunt May came to the door.
Oh.
And it was like 2 years before we finished the movie. And I think it was Tom Rothman who was like, "You dum-dums." That's got to be his dad. You're like, "Oh, you're right. That's stupid. We're stupid." So I think Rodney Rothman took the first crack at that. And he told me that he was like really thinking about what he would say to his son. Then you're like, now you're in there with Brian Tyree Henry and he's feeling it out, and we're rehearsing it with him in front of a microphone and capturing improvs that he does. And, you know, he's thinking about what he would say or what somebody said to him. And so now we gather all that stuff. Now we're in edit. We're trying to string the right performances together and make them into a real scene. And then, you know, now you're in the camera department. You're like, how do I show this? Let's do this cross-section view. How do we create a conversation between these characters with where the camera is, even though there's a wall in between them?
Yeah.
Because that was a big choice.
Right.
But so if you put the camera in the right place and you cut it the right way, it'll look like they're talking to each other.
Which is a framing we're familiar with, right? Like, I mean, we see that in live action films from time to time, right? Like, but in an animated film, like every detail of that has to be created, right?
And so because of that, often you will like create a scenario that is convenient because you can, because you can stage it any way you want. So a lot of times, a lot of animated films are looking for opera in those big emotional moments. And we do plenty of that, but we downshift and create dynamics so that like some of our big operatic moments, like let's downshift and just play this as naturalistic as we possibly can. And let's create inconveniences for ourselves. Yeah. Let's literally put a wall between the two characters. There was some debate about like, let Miles speak or not. We were like, no, let's cover his mouth. He can't move.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So we have this heartfelt scene where one character can't even speak and the other guy like doesn't know how does he communicate. And how Miles really communicates is by getting close to the door and not leaving.
Yeah.
Right? Like they stick together. That's all it is. So we're in the mix and going, can we pull out everything that Miles can't hear? Let's pull out all the backgrounds and let's turn the faders down. We need the audience right now to lean in like they want to know what's going to happen next. And the Foley of the stupid rolly chair, the amount of care that went into like, what is a sweet rolly chair sound? You know, and how could that sound say like I'm just gonna stay?
Yeah.
And can we take out all the ones that don't matter? So there's a lot of iteration and selection. And on the animation side, like, you know, how does dad carry himself? He's ashamed of himself, you know?
Yeah.
Miles can't see that. So again, it's with great, how does someone thrive? How does a movie thrive? With great care. And you have 800 people trying to make this thing great. you know?
So as the director's approaching that, like taking the example of, Brian Tyree's performance, but also just that the character, it's like, yes, he's ashamed of himself, but he's also like, I have to convey this message. I have to. What is literally the process? Is it the director saying he needs to look like he's a little ashamed of himself and then the animator adjusts? Like, how do you get to that point where you have like a fully layered performance with multiple emotions happening at once or an action covered, by an emotion?
So like that scene, I can't remember how many shots it is, but those shots will be divvied up between a dozen people just on the Jeff side, right? And they will have been cast to that because they've demonstrated some affinity and they know how to nail Jeff. So they're all cast. And then as a team reviewing each other's shots, a lot of people will use video reference and shoot themselves doing the scene, performing it like 15 different ways. And now you're reviewing that with your supervisor, maybe one of the directors. And then you're going like, oh, I like this little moment. Let's capture that and marry it to this. And, that's for every syllable. And then you're crossbreeding it with each other because you're a team and you're looking at, you're like a basketball team, like reviewing the tape together.
Wow.
And watching each other get reviewed. And then you're also like all in the same facility up in Vancouver. So you're like going to, you look at each other's desk. And so it is like a team sport. And so that's how a group of people can create a performance that's coherent because you're all working on your shots together, more or less at the same time.
And you're saying the animators are shooting themselves as like tests?
Yeah, and they might even bring their cubicle mate to come over and like, hey, will you do this? Or they'll like act it out with like their daughter at home. And then there's, then lots of iterations with the rig and blocking things out. And it's just like every single moment is designed. But that doesn't mean that there's not experimentation and lots of accident.
You know what's not an accident? The first of 2 commercial breaks. We'll be right back. Welcome back to More Than a Movie. I'm your host, Alex Fumero. When you think of Spider-Man, you think of big fight scenes, special effects, and Peter Parker swinging from buildings. But the fact is, no one goes to see a movie unless it has a good story. So I asked Phil Lord, how do you shape a good Spider-Man story? I think part of what makes this movie such a satisfying watch, aside from, great animation, it's the script and the story, right? Like both Miles and Peter B. Parker, or sort of bummy Spider-Man, have really clear and moving arcs. What makes for a really satisfying journey for a protagonist in a script for you? And how did you make sure in this one that it was sort of ready?
Our process is a bit of like a divining rod where like you throw stuff up and you kind of start to see what sticks. Like we did really early screenings where we knew the movie was like all screwed up, but you could feel where the audience is deeply engaged, and they're always engaged in this family, right?
Yeah.
And then they're really engaged when Peter B. Parker shows up. That's the like Jake Johnson, older version of Spider-Man who doesn't want to train Miles. Miles chases him down. And he finally agrees to like show him the ropes. When he shows up, the audience is really engaged because they've never seen a Spider-Man like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's take a second to listen to Jake Johnson's performance as Peter B. Parker, a kind of curmudgeonly version of Spider-Man.
This is amazing. You can teach me just like Peter said he would.
Before he died.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right.
Look, I made a promise to him. Peter, seriously.
Look, I'm not looking for a side gig as a Spider-Man coach. I got a lot going on in my dimension, like a lot.
With great power comes
Don't
great...
you dare finish that sentence. Don't do it. I'm sick of it. Well, my advice, go back to being a regular kid.
I don't have a choice.
The thing that you learn doing this a bunch is that the things you think are the reasons people go to the movies, you're usually dead wrong about. What makes a trailer for one of these movies compelling is not the like whipping around and flying stuff and the whiz bang stuff. That might be what gets you to look at the screen, look up from your phone. But what gets you to like see the movie is understanding clearly what a character's desire is and what their obstacle is and what the promise of what the movie's going to be is. And so Amy Pascal, our producing partner in these movies, she always says, a movie cannot be about a person. It must be about a relationship. So we always think about the movie in terms of relationship dynamics. We started the process thinking about Miles and Peter. Miles is someone who desperately needs a teacher. Peter is the worst teacher in the whole multiverse. Yeah. And he is forced. And Peter needs to learn how to be a father.
Yeah.
That's basically the premise, right? So we built a structure of the movie around that. We meet Miles, we spend like a reel with him, and then he can't tell his parents about this thing. It's too complicated. It's too devastating. It's a secret. He needs a lifeline. A lifeline shows up. And then we learned a lot about that story. And I think it took us a minute to realize like that the real story was about like Miles and his mom and dad. You can go seek, affirmation and guidance from outside, but the thing that you are comes from home.
Right.
Whatever that home is,
Right. Because from the beginning, Miles's character is looking for that in his Uncle Aaron. Right. So it's like it starts with, I love Uncle Aaron. And then Uncle Aaron dies. And then it's like Peter kind of fills that. But ultimately, it has to be about his family, his dad,
And he sends Peter home. He literally is like, I don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
The second movie is similar. He's like, seeks approval outside of himself.
Yeah.
In that case, the people he seeks approval from are less benevolent. But he ultimately, like, that journey just keeps bringing you home. But, that first is so critical to this character. And one of the things that we also continually learn is like characters can't spend very long resisting one another or resisting the premise. Like so many movies I've seen in like work in progress movies that need help, like they spend the whole second act with the character refusing to do the third act. And then at the end of the second act, they go, fine, I'll do the third act. And then you see the third act. And that usually doesn't work because you wait too long to let the characters engage with the premise of the movie. They kind of have to start engaging with the movie at the beginning of the second act.
Yeah, what do you mean by that for folks who aren't familiar with 3-act structure? Like what does that kind of mean?
In our movie, Miles says, train me. And Peter says, sorry, that's not who I am. See you later, kid. And he walks up the stairs and disappears from sight. And then he's like, fine.
Right.
That's about as long as you have. Right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is in early cuts of the movie, then he takes him to like eat a burger and, he's like, oh God, he's going to be the worst teacher ever. They go on their first mission and he keeps nagging Miles saying like, you can't come. You're not ready. Da, 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 da. Miles keeps, no, I'm going. And what you learn in that process is like, Peter's kind of overstating how little he wants Miles around. Right?
Yeah.
Cause he kind of likes him. And Miles, you get to demonstrate like this kid never gives up. Right? Yeah. Wow. What do you know? He might have this stuff. And then they have this big chase where like Peter teaches Miles to use his webs for the first time. And the thing that matters the most in that sequence that we figured out way too late is that like that scene needed to end. For a long time. It was like, oh, you still got a long way to go, kid. Instead, now it ends with like Peter goes, you're amazing. Miles goes, you're amazing. You're a great teacher. You're a great student. They needed to be on the same page and be partners in crime now and be friends.
Yeah.
You always underestimate how exciting it is to watch people in harmony. Watching the difference between watching people fight and watching people try to get along is so big. Watching people try to get along is the most fun thing in the whole universe. Watching people fight, we all get that at home.
Right.
It's no fun. You can do that for 30 seconds and then people are exhausted.
And it seems like it forces you to raise the stakes, right? Because once they're in that moment where they're going like, you're amazing. And it's they're like shooting like, and they're literally in unison swinging.
Yes.
Then they're both fucked. Like then it's not that they're fighting each other. Suddenly it's like, oh no, this greater obstacle has now knocked them down. And were it not for the help of some other Spideys, they'd be really fucked.
And we're going to now put pressure on this relationship.
Right.
Right.
Oh, right.
We've established it. And now everything that's going to happen is going to put pressure on that relationship. and see if they have the moves that it takes to get there. But what's not in doubt is that those two people have something that we're rooting for. That we're rooting not just for Miles, we're rooting for the relationship to succeed.
You know, that's the kind of serious part of the story, but the script is also like really fucking funny. I mean, I know you're a funny guy, but I'm curious, it's not uncommon to do punch-up passes like on a script. Like you're very focused on, obviously these moment-to-moment things are very important, but I mean, there's just jokes wall to wall in the movie. Like, did you guys do like a punch-up round? Did you bring in friends like some people do? Or if not, how do you guys sort of take the jokes you've laid? Like, when's the moment? How do you make it funnier? Or do you not even think about it?
It's like throughout. Chris and I are comedy writers. We came up in sitcom rooms. You know, I wrote the script with Rodney Rothman, who's ran David Letterman. So we jokes are the building blocks of these scenes.
Yeah.
In a way, like we write with using humor. We don't like write a straight version and then add jokes in. We try to think of funny scenarios that express the story. And the home run was when we thought of, he's got to say, I love you back, over the CB rating.
For those who don't remember, this is the scene where Miles' dad, who is a PDNY officer, drops Miles off at his fancy school in his squad car and won't let Miles off the hook until he says, I love you.
I love you, Miles.
Yeah, I know, Dad. See you Friday.
You gotta say I love you back.
Dad, are you serious?
I want to hear it.
You want to hear me
I
say
love
it?
you, Dad.
You're driving me off out of school?
I love you, Dad.
Look at this place.
Dad, I love you.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy.
That's so good.
Because that was like, it's so good. Everybody laughs. Once that happens, it's like minute 7 or 8 of the picture. It's early. Everybody breathes. Like the audience is in from that point on.
Yeah.
And they are laughing so hard because it's very strange. Miles is super embarrassed, but it's so warm.
Yeah.
And so now they love everybody and they're in. So they are not mutually exclusive, right? That's also a really important topic sentence about what this family are like. So we're always looking for, essentially always insecure about comedy, always going that joke didn't land. This is an edit or on the page. We're always trying to punch it up as we go. I'm sure there was a moment when we did a little room and brought people in, but I have to say it's more a daily part of the process. We punch each other's stuff up.
The comedy is also still serving what you need the characters to do or, not do, right? Like it's not just jokes for joke's sake necessarily.
There's plenty of those, but they tend not to make the final cut.
Right.
So you throw out all that stuff and you're like, oh, God, this is taking us over here. We really need to be on this, and then remember, a storyboard artist is looking at that. The editor is looking at that. The actors come in, they're adding stuff. So Chris and I, long ago, we were I want to be the kinds of guys that say yes.
Yeah.
Don't want to spend my life saying, no, you can't have that. No. I want to be yes, great, cool. Add it. Let's try it. And so that's been our general philosophy. So over time, you tend to layer on all these things and some of them land and some of them don't. But, you kind of boil it down to a roux. And it feels oh man, how did they construct this so cleverly? It's we didn't.
Yeah.
It was discovered. It was found. The movie wrote itself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, I'm sure that's how it feels. But when you're in it, I'm sure there's a lot of labor going on.
It's a lot of labor. There's a lot, unquestionable amount of labor. But the idea is that you don't have to necessarily edit all the time. You can just be let's see.
Let's try.
We all laughed at that. A laugh is science. The audience laughs. It's funny. If they didn't laugh, it's not funny. I'm sorry. It's something we learned on Jump Street. If it takes as long to argue about doing another take as it does to do another take, so let's just do another take.
Yeah, and it takes just as long to argue about whether we should do another commercial as if we just do another commercial. So let's do another commercial. Okay, you whiny babies, the commercial break is over, and we are back. talking to Phil Lord about how you cast an animated film. So aside from, the terrific leads in the movie, which we've talked about, there are a lot of fun cameos in the movie, like Lily Tomlin as Aunt May, or Nick Cage as Noir, Natalie Morales, Oscar Isaac, Greta Lee, Post Malone, Joaquin Cosio, and of course, Stan Lee. So that's a lot of folks of varying levels of fame, but also all really talented and fun. Are you consciously it'd be really fun to have this person and just get them in? What's the motivation to have Oscar Isaac come in and do a 2-line thing, Or Natalie, who I know you work with also on other things, and go, Natalie would be fun here.
Yeah, she plays my cousin. The teacher is based on my cousin.
Oh, really?
My cousin, Ceci, who teaches at LaSalle.
Oh, amazing.
We went to high school together. Anytime I write about teachers, I'm always pinging her and being like, I want to see how you are with the students. She was teaching kids about Miles age. She was teaching at Ransom at the time. I was like, let me see what you got. In the class, she's a tough customer. And so I was like, oh, who do I know who's kind of disarming like that? Oh, Natalie.
Yeah.
She'll do great. And with Stan, obviously, it was we need to think of a way to include him in the movie in a way that's, he's done so many cameos. It's not exciting to see him do a cameo, just to be on the bus or whatever. We need a moment that does something, accelerates Miles, affirms
and
him,
encourages him. Yeah. You'll grow into it. Yeah.
You'll grow into it. And the other thing that we do when we work with somebody like that is we know we're going to get 1 or 2 chances. So we'll write, 7 pages of ideas.
Yeah.
And try to get as many of them as we can. So that we've got all right, here's this bit. If that doesn't work, we'll try something else. We get a lot of different versions. We just did Metro Boomin in the last movie. And especially with someone who's not a professional comedian or actor, you just go all right, here's 7 bits. Let's see which of these just connects, let's take a few swings and see where he could really get clean through this idea because he gets it,
So fun.
And, and you can tell because you look in the booth and you're oh yeah, they're laughing. That works. So we don't ever consciously go we need to get famous people in the movie. It's what does the movie need right now? At the post-credit scene was oh, it'd be great to do a post-credit scene. We always had this idea of what's the next movie going to be? Could we just leave them one more little goose thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then we had met Oscar when we were out in London doing Star Wars stuff. And somehow I had his phone number. And I was able to ping him and be this is crazy. Will you try this? And then the good news is if we do another movie, let's not worry about it like a deal, but you'll have us over a barrel.
Right.
And so we worked it out.
Another very fun and expensive part of a lot of movies. And I lost count of the amount of needle drops that you have in this movie. How awesome is it that you can just be I want Biggie for this section? Because
it takes so long. It
does.
It takes so long because listen, you have to prove it. And a song like Biggie winds up in the movie because you tried 10 other songs and none of them did the same thing.
Right.
It snuck up on us. We threw it in the screening and we were looking for what's a kind of old school Brooklyn artist who could kind of sound like Uncle Aaron, who's smart and literate and knows music history. What would feel right? And the response from the audience to that song.
Yeah.
Because you've got kids and parents. The parents are all losing their minds because they can't believe Biggie's in an animated film. That snuck up on me. I was I can't believe how much they like this. They feel so invited to the party.
Yeah.
And we're getting away with something, and we stole Dad's car. That's how it sounds.
And you get good mileage out of some. I mean, the Post Malone stuff with him singing the Post Malone, and that becomes a running bit where he needs to sing it to calm himself down. I mean, that's how you really squeeze every ounce of juice out of a license.
I can't remember where it came from, except that nobody knew that song. That song is 20 times platinum, maybe 30. And Sway Lee is the guy who wrote it. Post wasn't on it when we put it in the movie. We're who's Sway Lee? He's this cool young songwriter, and we needed a song that Miles could try to sing, but it was like just above his pay grade. Like,
yeah.
He couldn't quite pull it off. Like, that's what Rodney wrote in the script. So we just picked it because it was the perfect song for Miles to not quite be able to sing.
Yeah.
And it was pretty. That's the other thing about the hip hop songs in like this movie, and especially the latest one, like they're quite pretty. They're warm, so that worked. And then, the song worked so well. We needed a way, like later in the movie, like we're like, how are we going to get Miles off the ceiling?
Yeah.
We need a reason. Oh, maybe he can sing the song again. Let's give it a shot.
Just a cappella. It just sounds it's so vulnerable, and he's sort of like half whispering it because he doesn't want, but he's got to sing it to himself. It's great.
Embarrassing. The woman, Katie Greathouse, who was our music editor, won the award for music editors for the year in all pictures, animated, live action, or whatever, because people recognized the incredible job she did cutting all these old school tracks. The Kieran Lehman, who is the music supervisor, he got a big award. Like, they did the best job that year of like integrating songs into a movie. Like, it was amazing.
Speaking of awards, this movie won the Oscar for Best Animated Film. How fucking good did that feel? Like, what was that? How fucking good did it feel when you heard those words and were on that stage? What was that like?
It's very interesting. Was obviously incredibly satisfying. What's interesting is like that moment before, I was sitting next to Chris. Believe it or not, we like held hands.
No, I believe that. Yeah.
And like, I'm a good Catholic. I prayed for grace. Because I was like, if we lose, I want to like have a good losing face.
Yep.
And if we win, I want to go up and like represent this movie really well. And that's the thing that like really strikes you is like, I think we all bum rushed the stage. Like 8 of us went up there and we were reminding ourselves the whole run, like we are not winning an award. The film is winning an award. We are the representatives of the film and the crew. And we are here to write by them and speak in ways that they would all be proud of. Mm-hmm. And that's what we tried to do the whole run, because the award stuff is so silly, but it can like warp your brain.
Yeah.
That award season is very like weird. You're in all these crazy rooms with like Spike Lee's over there. Yeah. Like it can make you weird. And it you can just put way too much importance on it because it's obviously like the product is in the theater and this is like a byproduct, like a waste product of the thing. And it's really fun. And the best thing about it is the fellowship you develop with the other filmmakers that are on the awards like tour with you.
Yeah.
You see these people over and over and over again. Like the kid from Boyhood was our buddy and we got to know him really well. It was really nice. We got to like meet Rick Linklater, and especially with all the other animated filmmakers who we spend like 5 years in a foxhole in different parts of the world. And we
like
never get to
you're trauma
know each
bonded.
other.
Yeah.
And so we're trauma bonded, but we're like, also like, we're in these weird rooms. No one wants to talk to us. It's like us and the documentarians, like over by the bar, while all the photographers are taking pictures of the actors, as they should. But like, we got to know Jimmy and Chai, who made Free Solo. You get to know your cohort of filmmakers, and it's really fun. That part is fantastic.
Well, I mean, the process of delivering a film of this complexity, it's like magnitudes of difficulty. And all movies are a grind to finish for anyone who hasn't made a movie. But I saw in an interview that you said you literally wanted the animation to like break the servers and the equipment that people normally use to make it. Did you feel like this kind of movie was particularly grueling for everyone involved?
I say that I want to break the pipes because I don't want the movie to conform to the process. Uh-huh. I want the process to conform to the movie, meaning like we have all these like very well developed VFX pipelines and techniques that are, designed to make a movie that looks a certain way and behaves a certain way. And our thing from the very jump was like, whatever those things are, those shaders, the rigs, like the way that we make these movies normally, we can't think like that. We're going to make a look of picture that is very inconvenient for those systems. Because
you wanted to push the form because it was like important?
Yeah, because everybody has like big ideas about what they want the movie to look like. And then you hit a brick wall when you go into these pipelines that are built to make the best thing for the pipeline is for your movie to be exactly the same as the last movie that it made.
Right.
And so we all got together with the, ImageWorks and all of and Danny Dimian of the VFX Soup of the first movie. Mm-hmm. And everybody got together, we hands in the middle, we're going to break the pipes.
Yeah.
Not the people, the pipes, so that it will reveal the people.
Yeah.
And we're going to make a movie, and the movie is to some degrees based on light and how light bounces off of things. But the idea was we need to teach a computer to draw. And we're not thinking about this as a photograph. This is an illustration of a photograph. That's totally different philosophy. It's you start with a 3D space and cameras, and then you're trying to turn that into an illustration of itself. And so that means that all the lighting artists whose job it is on a typical animated picture to set lights and make them look really pretty, they have to get good at not just setting the lights and making them fit the sequence, but then figuring out how to illustrate the lights. Are we going to use Ben-Day dots or line work? And how are we going to layer those things? And then how is that going to move? Because you can make it look great for a frame that's still, but making it move in a way that's exciting, not distracting, doesn't look like a friggin' flash show. That's really complicated. And what I mean about breaking the pipes is somebody has to figure out the coding of that, the processes of that. Tons of trial and error. For a year, we could only make this movie look good at night, and we could not make any daytime exterior scenes because they just looked bad because we hadn't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
So we started showing the movie to the studio, and they're like, "Is this whole movie going to be dark?" I'm like, "No. We just don't know how to make it the sunny scenes good yet. Just give us a second, And so all that process that I'm talking about in the screenplay, that's happening with the art department, the lighting artists, the camera artists, the VFX supervisors, the coders, the shaders, the effects people.
Right.
We're all going that looks too normal. That looks too standard. That looks like another studio could have made that. How's this movie going to make this? Could this look more like our favorite kids' book, Snowy Day? Huh. Could it look more like one artist made this shot by hand? Because ultimately that's what it is.
Right.
It is one lighting artist making this shot by hand, and that's how the movie winds up looking how it does. It looks bespoke.
It does. Every frame looks like that in a way that I think actually, weirdly, it's animated. I think that's why it feels live action, even though it's not, because life is like that.
It's imperfect. The light isn't perfect. The light, you shoot all day long.
Yeah.
So the light is perfect for this one shot, but then literally you're going to cut to something else. The sun's going to be the exact opposite position. You have to trust the audience is going to just go with it. And that messiness is actually textured. Right. So what we're trying to do is elevate the artist above the systems that make the movie, so that the artist now has control and can make the thing wonderful and personal.
Which is why when you're talking about going up and accepting that award on behalf of 800 people, it's literal, because each one of those people works so fucking hard for this one frame, one moment, one scene.
Yeah. And success has many authors, but people were so proud of that movie because they saw themselves in it all the time. We had 3 directors. Every one of them can look at that movie and go, yeah, I did that. I did that. I did that. I brought that. That's the movie would not be the same without me.
Yeah.
And when you have that many people, it can introduce a problem, which is that you wind up with the average of everybody instead of every artist percolating through the picture so that they wave and say hello. And it's a jazz combo where okay, now it's time for Peter Ramsey to do a solo.
Yeah.
Right. Let us all just sit back and admire what an amazing virtuoso he is. We just have to keep the beat, and everybody takes turns. It's a combination of teamwork and individual creative, flamboyance.
So just to mention the recent sequel, briefly, Across the Spider-Verse, we now have an Afro-Latino Spider-Man, an Irish Latino Spider-Man, a Spider-Woman, a Black Spider-Woman, a Black Spider-Man, an Indian Spider-Man, a homeless Spider-Man. Why, Phil Lord, are you trying to push your woke agenda on all of this?
I mean, the thing that's so silly is go walk outside on the street, go to a Dodger game, walk around Miami. This is what the world looks like, dude.
Yeah.
The people who are making this movie, that's what they look like.
Yeah.
And that's what the audience look like. So we're doing everyone a disservice by not reflecting the world as it actually is. And so that complicates our lives. It means we have to be diligent about having a diverse crew. It means that when, an Indian animator in Vancouver writes you an email and goes like, I think the Indian Spider-Man could be like a little bit better in this way or that way, it means you have to stop and get everyone together and make it better. And, the good news is it makes the movie better the whole way through. There was a lot of anxiety about like Jessica Drew. There was some people who were like ambivalent about like a Black pregnant Spider Woman on a motorcycle. Like, is that good for the kid? And meanwhile, like a white man can carry a baby in a baby carrier and like fly around, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But like there was some anxiety about that. And because that's, like, is that the only Black woman we're going to have in the movie and she's pregnant? I was like, well, maybe the answer is maybe she's not the only Black woman in the movie.
Right.
So like the idea is like, well, then we need to add another Spider Woman of color so that no one person has to be iconographic. They can each be themselves. They can each be a personality, a human being, an individual, and stop being like that their character is that they're a lady Spider-Man, that their character can be they're Gwen Stacy or they're a person. And so in this movie, it was important to us, like the first reel of the movie is in Gwen's point of view. Not only is it in Gwen's point of view, the entire environment that you're watching the movie in warps and moves and changes color according to how she moves through the world.
Right.
That's like the internality of one character expressed throughout every pixel that's on the frame. That's so fun. It adds so much value to the audience. And it gives like kids like, look, I'm going to watch this whole movie through this young woman's point of view. That's like what the power of cinema. And I'm not saying like everything we did was like flawless, but what we're trying to do is say Gwen Stacy, Jessica Drew, Hobie Brown, Oscar Isaac, Miles Morales, these characters and Peter Parker, like they all belong, even though they all look different with different drawing styles and different frame rates and like different, like completely different backgrounds. They come from different universes and they occupy the same frame together and it looks cool. That's the joke. Like they belong in the frame together, no matter the fact that they don't agree visually. They don't have to relinquish their native house art drawing style. They get to retain that, but still walk around and occupy the same room. And that to me is like what all these movies are about, that this collage of people belong together.
I can't think of a better way to end. I agree. And I love that. And I think that is part of why I enjoy watching these movies so much. So thanks so much, Phil, for taking the time. And
it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Peter Parkers, that's our episode. So far, we've been doing a lot of episodes about lazy-ass people who just make one movie in 1 year. But next week, I'm talking to a first-time director who made not one, but 2 movies in 1 year. Tune in for Natalie Morales and her debut, Films, Language Lessons, and Plan B. More Than a Movie Season 2 was produced by Chloe Tagliagambe with the help of Reynolds Gutierrez and Veronica Hernandez in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network. Hosted by me, Alex Fumero. Edited by Rose Reed and Chloe Tagliagambe with the help of Saida Quevedo. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Rose Reed, Isaac Lee, and me, Alex Fumero. Sound design by Gonzalo Messi. Original music by Golden Minds, Darko, and IME. Recorded at JTB Studios and Vaudeville Sound. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. For more My Cultura podcasts, listen to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.